held special feelings towards the household of Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, expressions of which were imitated by his many followers. Although he reached the rank of Grand Scholar or Ayatollah, he humbly lived in a small house and made his living from a small agricultural plot of land which he inherited from his grandfather. He never was arrogant or conceited and offered the same level of respect to his students that he proffered to his teachers. In his later years, he would often hold study sessions with Henry Corbin and Sayyid Hussein Nasr, in which not only the classical text of divine wisdom and gnosis were discussed, but also a whole cycle of what Nasr calls comparative gnosis, and in each session the sacred text of one of the major religions containing mystical and Gnostic teachings such as the Tao Te Ching, the Upanishads, and the Gospel of John were discussed and compared with Sufism and Islamic Gnostic doctrines in general. Sayyid Tabatabai authored several books that covered many fields of study, including a series of books on Shia Islam, which made him an internationally recognized authority on the Shia faith. If a single work is to be named as his masterpiece, it is Al-Mizan, the outcome of his lifelong labor in the sphere of Quranic studies, in which he applied both a style and an approach that are uniquely different from those of all other interpretations of the Quran. Sayyid Muhammad Hussein Tabatabai died on the 7th of November 1981 in Qom, Iran. He is buried in the nearby mosque of the shrine of Sayyida Masuma, the sister of Imam Ali Rida, peace be upon him.
Around the world, outside the mainstream, anywhere, everywhere. A media of your land, of your creation. A new media and a new era. Will it take the lead in the future? I believe so. This is Underground.
Underground, when vague turns to clarity. Al-Etejah News Channel. The truth fears no questions.
Anyone can develop an ecological awareness in their daily lives and above all at work, where we tend to waste a great deal of a very precious resource, paper. Anyone who works in an office consumes between 50 and 75 kilos of paper per year. This is a lot, yet we could easily cut this figure in half. How? By choosing to recycle paper, by printing and photocopying recto verso, by cutting and pasting, filling a page up rather than printing just a few lines, by not printing out emails, by using internal networks as much as possible, notably to arrange meetings or give out information. This cuts the need for paper memos and notes. Stop large print programs triggered by mistake. Reuse paper used for notes and drafts. Even if you use your computer and photocopier wisely, think about switching it off along with the lights if you leave your office for more than 30 minutes.
Beyond the lines, beyond the surface. Depth, clarity, substance. Beyond the discourse.
Beyond politics, beyond the shallowness of everyday politics. Al-Etejah World News, the world within your reach.
Hello, this is Al-Etejah's News Briefs. I'm Zainab Alwi. 7 people were killed and more than 260 wounded in Egypt as clashes between supporters and opponents of deposed President Mohamed Morsi raged through the night into Tuesday. Meanwhile, a new cabinet primarily made up of technocrats and liberals has reportedly been sworn in today and is expected to remain in place until elections are held. A high-ranking pre-Syrian army official said today that Al-Qaeda-linked groups are planning to establish an Islamic State in North Syria. He said the declaration will be made on the last day of the holy month of Ramadan, signaling further divisions among armed militants in the country. The Russian Migration Service confirmed today that it has received U.S. whistleblower Edward Snowden's application for temporary asylum. Now it can take authorities up to 3 months to consider his request. Thousands of workers, students and pensioners took to the streets of Athens today to protest against public sector cuts, which will likely cost thousands of state workers their jobs. Meanwhile, unions opposing austerity measures in Greece are also staging their 4th general strike this year. And at least 2 people were killed today in Bangladesh as police clashed with thousands of protesters demonstrating against the conviction of Islamist Party leader Ghulam Azzam. Police said they opened fire after protesters attacked a policeman in the southwestern district of Sedkira. Well, that's it for today. Thank you for watching.
Pollution and climate change, medicine manipulation, genetically modified food, the destruction of wildlife, and corporate exploitation. These are all part of a new terrorism threatening our future.
Eco-terrorism, global awakening to a world under threat. Al-Etejah News Channel. The truth fears no questions.
Pollution and climate change, medicine manipulation, genetically modified food, the destruction of wildlife, and corporate exploitation. These are all part of a new terrorism threatening our future.
Eco-terrorism, global awakening to a world under threat. Al-Etejah News Channel. The truth fears no questions. Al-Etejah News Channel. The truth fears no questions.
Hello and welcome to a new episode of our weekly show. I'm your host, Hasan Youness. The invasion of privacy via spying on the reporters of Associated Press has been a scandal which reminded the analysts of the Nixon's Watergate. More recently, and since more than a month, outrage has peaked in response to news about National Security Agency surveillance and other evidence that all three branches of the US government are turning the USA into Big Brother. No less than 3 billion pieces of data were collected from individuals, institutions, and businesses across the continent of Europe in the course of March 2013 alone. Every European state was subject to surveillance, with the continent's biggest economy, Germany, subjected to the most scrutiny. Might this invasion of privacy jeopardize the relationship between the USA and the European Union? What are the stances of the European states, and what are the global repercussions of such spying activities? How can this have an influence on Obama's popularity and his administration's image? We will probe deep insights about these questions, among many others, with Dr. George Labaki, a political analyst and political science professor at Notre Dame University. Hello, Dr. George. And we will be joined in this episode through a phone intervention with Dr. Hilal Khachan, who is a political science professor at AUB, and he is a political analyst as well. Before exploring deep insights about this topic, we will have a report and we'll be back.
A few weeks ago, the Obama administration was plagued by controversy and scandal a few short months into the president's second term. The scandals are related to Benghazi report, the Internal Revenue Service, and spying on the reporters of the Associated Press. The U.S. Department of Justice secretly procured 2 months' worth of telephone logs for journalists at the Associated Press, one of the world's largest news-gathering organizations. Apparently, the records were seized as part of an investigation into national security-related leaks. More recently, the European Union demanded that the United States explains a report in a German magazine stating that Washington is spying on the group using unusually strong language to confront its closest trading partner over its alleged surveillance activities. The Der Spiegel report mentioned that the U.S. Secret Service had tapped EU offices in Washington and Brussels and at the United Nations. The National Security Agency bugged EU offices and gained access to EU internal computer networks in the latest revelation of alleged US spying work, which has prompted outrage by EU politicians. The US Secret Service taps 500 million phone calls, emails, and text messages in Germany in a typical month. The NSA heat map published in the Guardian newspaper revealed that no less than 3 billion pieces of data were collected from individuals, institutions, and businesses across the European continent in March 2013 alone. Every European state was subject to surveillance, while the continent's biggest economy, Germany, was subjected to the most scrutiny. This has led to heated debates over the balance between privacy rights and national security. The extent to which Washington's EU allies are being monitored has emerged as an issue of particular concern. Martin Schulz, president of the EU Parliament, who bears the German nationality, said that if the report was correct, it would have a severe impact on relations between the EU and the United States. Some policymakers believe that talks for a free trade agreement between Washington and the EU should be stopped until further clarifications from the United States. The European Commissioner for Justice and Fundamental Rights, Viviane Reding, said at a public event in Luxembourg that partners do not spy on each other. She added that we cannot negotiate over a big transatlantic market if there is the slightest doubt that our partners are carrying out spying activities on the offices of our negotiators. Previously, the European Parliament had also expressed its concern with the demand made by American intelligence agencies for extensive information on all European citizens attempting to enter the US. In an initial comment on the scandal, the British Financial Times also expressed concern about the consequences of the US spying operations for international diplomacy and business interests. However, the question which emerges is how negotiations between the US and EU can continue while the Europeans fear that their negotiating position is being listened to beforehand.
And may God bless the United States of America.
Hello again to Global Insight. Hello, Dr. Labaki. In fact, as we've seen in the report, the extent to which the spying activities which were conducted by the US and namely by the National Security Agency have great impact and negative repercussions on the relationship between the US and the EU. In fact, many justifications were given to these spying activities, one of which was the national security. Does the preserving the national security or combating terrorism justify the privacy invasion?
Yes, I think it has been always a concern for governments to protect national security, at the same time to keep privacy. But what we have seen in your report and what's happening is really an unprecedented, gigantic effort to spy over piracy. This has been made possible by things that are totally new in history. The huge capacity, electronic capacity, to monitor, to record, to spy basically on everything.
And to have access to whatever you want.
To have access, internet,
yeah,
communications, emails, phone calls.
You're talking about a massive capacity,
yes.
And the evidence is the 3 billion pieces of data which were collected from individuals, institutions and businesses across Europe.
Yes.
This shows that it's unprecedented.
Furthermore, I have read somewhere that the NSA is capable of taping every day 1.5 billion emails. Yeah. Practically, they can really listen and tape everything. So this is really what is unique and what is something to be worried about. That huge capacity that is not leaving room to any privacy. Edward Snowden, the hero of that supposedly scandal, has said that we have the means to observe, to control everybody, including President Obama, if just himself. We had his email access or address. So I think this is something that is very dangerous, that threatens the foundations of democracy, that raises a lot of very important questions. One thing here I have to say and to stress upon, it's not enough to say we have democratic rule. We have the principle of division of powers, the check and balance. It's a continuous fight. And today, modern technologies, especially communication technologies, are the biggest threat, unique, immense threat in history on human privacy and freedom.
But in a democracy, you have to preserve the rights of people, and you have to offer them a high quality of life, and to protect them from any possibility for terrorism or for terrorist attacks. So many arguments say that from a utilitarian approach or from a cost-benefit analysis, the benefits from invading their privacy, the benefits exceed the cost of invading the privacy. So what's your stance regarding this?
Well, it has helped, or it helps avoiding, of course, some terrorist acts. But there is no zero security. Two, everybody knows that, unfortunately, terrorist acts will continue. So, number three, you cannot also make of every citizen someone who is suspicious and could be accused. Often governments take advantage of the psychology of the public opinion when some big events take place. I take an example, September 11. Of course, you know, it was a huge, unprecedented, massive attack. the United States government benefited from that event to pass a number of legislations, including what was referred to as the Patriot Act of 2006. That Patriot Act has allowed and opened a large breach to intercept communications, quote unquote, supposed to fight terrorism.
This takes us to the distinction between the EU policy concerning privacy and US policy concerning privacy. What distinction can you make, and can you stress on the French policies regarding the invasion of privacy, because they have some particularities?
Yes. Well, there are big differences. At the European level, there are a number of treaties that are protecting privacy from government interference. And concerning the French case, more than 20 years ago, 30 years ago, they have created a specific and special agency called Commission Informatique et Liberté. If you want, Commission for
Democracy and Liberty.
And Liberty. And Computer. That committee has to give its opinion on every data building process. And that committee is composed of people from the private sector. The government does not control that commission. So every data, every connection of data files has to be approved by that commission. Also, people have the right of access. Imagine there is a file concerning a citizen. Under certain circumstances, he has the access to his file, and he is able to correct data.
To adjust,
to adjust. Well, let me just give you how serious it is.
And this applies to the privacy policies in certain corporations. Whenever an employee, for example, discloses some information to someone concerned in the HR department, for example, he can have access to adjustment of his portfolio. So it's a right for every citizen, actually.
Absolutely. Imagine there is erroneous data on someone. It can destroy the person's future, professional future, career, without him knowing what happened and without him being guilty. So that French law gives the right of access, a wide right. Of course, it's never 100%, but he can know if there is a file concerning him. If there is a file, he could be informed if there is something negative or positive. And again, he may have the right to correct the false data that was written behind his back. So there is really a big difference. Another problem I want to mention, here in the US case, we have two very important serious breaches. On one hand, you collect data. You listen to everybody, it's very simple. But on the other hand, what about the data keeping, storing? That data, as you know, remains stored.
And who will have access to this data as well?
Who will have access to this data? So this data has to be dealt with. Everybody knows that all our emails, messages are registered and kept somewhere. You know, you send a message, you delete it, you think it was over, but someone, it's present somewhere. Well, I think in international law, we need a treaty to regulate social media and such data storage. I believe strongly
haven't there been any legislation regarding...
There are no legislations.
No legislations left.
And here I want to mention a judge who was member and oversight U.S. court, James Robertson, who is saying that finally there is no real oversight. And he is criticizing the system, and he is asking for declassification of information and of a real debate in the court, not on one side dealing with issues. I give you the file, I get the authorization, I leave, that's it.
Isn't there a correlation between the legislations regarding the intellectual property rights and the rights for invasion of privacy?
Well, here you are raising a very important question. I want to rephrase it as the issue of economic intelligence. As you know, after the collapse of the Soviet Union, military intelligence remained important but became secondary. What was really important was economic information. We know that all countries of the world have policies. They are spying. They try to grab economic information, technologies, numbers concerning exchange, contract negotiations.
To have an edge with respect to other economies.
About that. And we know that intelligence community is giving that information to their national companies. We have an example in the airline industry. We know that there has been a taping of the French company Airbus or the European company Airbus to the advantage of the US company, corresponding US company. So here,
and everyone knows the rivalry between these two companies.
It is a very important area where under economic intelligence there is a lot of, let's say it, a lot of work done to collect that data, legally and illegally.
And it's one of the concerns, as mentioned in the report, it's one of the concerns of the European Union countries and one of the concerns of Germany, so that the US doesn't have an edge or an upper hand in the economic aspects in their negotiation with the EU.
Yeah. Here, just concerning economic intelligence, you have the right to collect information that is published. But unfortunately, it's not they are not limited to that. They are collecting everything through illegal means, which make it economic espionage and not economic intelligence. So concerning the EU, I think the EU is very much worried. There is a lot of concern, especially that they are envisioning a new free trade area between the United States and the European Union.
The free trade area requires deep insights. We will discover these insights about the free trade area between the EU and the US right after the break.
The world, outside the mainstream, anywhere, everywhere. A media of your land, of your creation. A new media in a new era. Will it take the lead in the future? I believe so. This is Underground.
Underground, when vague turns to clarity.
Hello again to Global Insight. Dr. Labaki, before the break, we were talking about the economic intelligence and its impact on the trade partners, and definitely the US and the EU are considered trade partners par excellence, especially the relation between Germany and the US. And this economic intelligence might have an impact on the relation between these two trading blocs, if we want to name them so, especially before the free trade agreement which is being negotiated. What might the impact be on the free trade agreement?
Well, unfortunately, Europe is divided on many issues. You have 28 countries, they have all to agree, which makes unanimity almost impossible. I think that we'll have two types of opinions, mainly the French, who will be very much angry, who would like to put strict rules over the next negotiations. And we'll have, I think, a number of other countries that would say, everybody is doing it, let's proceed. So, but I think the European public opinion is very much outraged. I would have to look on NGOs, civil liberties associations. These, I think, will be at the lead of the fight against such intrusion in Europe, on Europeans, on their private and on their privacy.
Before proceeding with the discussion about the free trade agreement between the EU and the US, I'm glad to have via a phone intervention Dr. Hilal Khachan, who is a political analyst and political science professor at the American University of Beirut. Hello, Dr. Khachan.
Good evening.
Can you hear me clearly?
Yeah, I can.
Okay. In fact, the relationship between the EU and the US, according to many critics and commentators, is being jeopardized through the spying, or due to the spying which is taking place through the National Security Agency. To what extent might the relation be jeopardized, and in which aspects?
Well, you know, there is no question that American spying on European enterprises and publics embarrasses the U.S. administration, and also makes it imperative upon European countries to issue statements to condemn such invasion of privacy. But let's be realistic about it. first of all, European public opinion is not highly supportive of the American administration, and they really have issues with the American administration, and these have a track. Now, I don't expect that the uproar, which is understandable by European public opinion, to really injure American-European relations. After all, we have evidence that European countries, including the French government, have also spied on their publics. After all, the Americans can always say there are exigencies of national security that warrant such limited, quote-unquote, such limited invasions of privacy. But I don't really see a long-term damaging effect on American-European relations.
Does Dr. Khachan, does national security justify invasion of privacy?
Well, in principle, it does not. But the Americans can claim, as they always do, that there are issues of high importance that warrant such limited activity. Actually, they did it in the past on American users. You know, they invaded their email accounts, they invaded their telephone conversations. You know, and they can argue that if we can do it to our own people, we might as well do it to Europeans, provided that we have evidence that it would reduce the likelihood of terrorism.
Such activities are embarrassing to the Obama's administration, especially when you are spying on your European partners. Is it as embarrassing as spying on the reporters of Associated Press, which took place more than a month ago?
Well, spying is spying. Embarrassment is an embarrassment. But again, let's face it, allies spy against each other. It is, well, of course, when allies spy against each other, the aim is not to jeopardize their relations or to undermine the allied country. But usually what they call such spying as benign spying that aims at benefiting the country that spies, but does not by necessity injures the allied country that is being spied upon. I don't think it will have, again, a long-term impact on the Obama administration. Yes, it may cause him some trouble. It may cause him to issue a statement to justify the event, but I don't think it will have long-term effect. And eventually, the matter will subside, and the Europeans will either bite the bullet or forget about it.
Mm-hmm. Dr. Hilal Khachan, I highly thank you for your deep insights about this topic. Thanks a lot.
My pleasure. Have a good evening.
What have more impact on the Obama administration? Invading the privacy of reporters, as was the case of Associated Press, or invading the privacy of the European partners?
I think the scope of the second one is much broader.
Mm-hmm.
Edward Snowden really had opened a big breach in a system that was hidden but known to a few insiders. But if you allow me, I would like to stress the importance and the tragic importance of that issue of invading of privacy.
Yeah.
Obama said that, look, everybody is doing it. Yes, we are doing it.
When in Rome, do as the Romans do.
Look, are we going back to an Orwellian world? Are we going back to a new McCarthyism? So this is a very serious question. We understand there is a need for a balance between national security and privacy. You have a structure
but in the case of the spying on the reporters of the Associated Press, it was a big scandal in the U.S. and many commentators said that it might be the Watergate of Obama, as happened with Nixon before. So was the impact more severe at that time than spying on the European Union countries?
No, I don't think so. First of all, it was much more limited. Two, here again, it has both national and an international dimension. Mm-hmm. And Snowden has gotten much more coverage in the media, in international media, so which has raised much more retaliations and comments, especially from most European presidents and leaders. Mm. So really, here we can talk about a much, much larger scandal that will have deep roots on the future relationships between Europe and the United States. Of course, negotiations will resume in the future, but I think
with more skepticism,
there will
maybe,
be more
and
suspicion from each side. Every side will go to redraw his negotiation strategies.
And the trust is a prerequisite for any negotiation.
Absolutely.
So the prerequisite isn't there. This might hinder the negotiations.
History tells us that such breaches in history in the past would have led to wars. So today things will deteriorate for a while. But I do also believe that the European public opinion is much aware than we might think about the scandal. In Europe, you have a very rooted tradition of privacy, of civil liberties, private freedoms. And I think
why are the legislations in Europe and France more protective of the privacy right than the US? Are the concerns in Europe different from the security concerns in the US, or the threat is there anywhere?
I think you have to go back to the French Revolution principles that has made the private freedoms, privacy, sacred.
Back in 1789, it has anticipated what we might face now.
That was written and taught to everyone. So really here, culturally, Europeans are more rooted in this background. As you know, the US, you have a tradition of civil liberties, but in a way, it's also more pragmatic, you know. It's more today, liberals in America and conservatives don't see that from a negative point of view.
But the threat of national security nowadays in the year 2013 are different than the threats which were there in the year 1789. So don't you think that the legislations can tolerate being more lenient in comparison to 2 centuries ago?
Look, threats are threats. The issue of national security will always exist. What we are
But the extent to which it's existing is more. It's peaking now.
A danger is a danger. In old times, you had, or after World War II, you had communism. You had how many states, communist states? The second world superpower. Today, you have terrorism. Okay, terrorism is spread here and there. Maybe it's smaller, but you don't know where terrorists are. They operate across countries and boundaries.
And whenever they are being sent to certain countries which are characterized by extremism, they are being radicalized when they are being sent back to the European Union countries. So this is also a threat.
Again, you have to make a balance between the two. And it's better to release a criminal than to condemn an innocent. If you make all humankind potential person to be accused, I think there is a problem also. I think the issue is dangerous, too much dangerous for the future of democracy. We are not denying the right to trace criminals, to arrest them. I told you, let's take Assange and Robert Snowden. What is common between them? 2 were members of a system, very well rounded up, supposedly secured, untraceable. And then from within, you had breaches. You have people unveiling a lot of information. What does that mean? You have a data that finally you cannot control. And I can tell you, it's the beginning of a trend. Based on analysis, of course, you will see more and more Snowden and Assange coming out and saying, look how things are being dealt with. So I think this will be the price to pay for this huge operation of building up huge data. Are you sure that you can control it? So for that reason, I think there is a need to clear out things, to set a clear strategy, not to try to collect everything, to make everyone suspicious, because there is a risk of abusing such information, and to be, I think, more professional, and when you think there is a need, to have access to the data. That judge never denied when he was in the court all the requests of the administration to tape, to wire, to collect data. So I think this is a very serious issue.
What justifies the suspicion and the skepticism from the side of the US to spy on the EU? Is there a justification? Other than the national security, why should they? What's the motive for spying on the EU partners?
Well, technically, the network, that PRISM thing, is so much huge. Okay, you cannot tape or check Americans, but you can check and observe other foreigners. But Americans are in contact with foreigners. Some Americans are in Europe. So finally, you have a big space. You control everybody. So this is the problem. It's so much spread. The authorization is so much broad that finally you start from foreign countries. You end up in the U.S. You end up listening to everybody. So I think the mandate should be much more restricted. There is a need to debate the issue. The reactions in the U.S. were contrary to the reactions in the European Union. Most of the political establishment stood up by the NSA. Only Civil Liberties Association were opposing that. So because everybody is thinking, this is our national security, it's a top priority, nothing else counts. No, we think things should be also seen from a different angle. Yes, national security concerns are extremely important.
But the right of having
my
personal privacy is important
people's
as well.
privacy is as well as important, because recent experience have shown leaks, have shown the possibility of misusing of that data.
Will the US be more strict in their legislations, or will the European Union be more lenient, in your opinion?
Well, I think the European Union will try to keep the same stand of protecting privacy. In the US, I think most of the public opinion, and especially the political establishment, will support government strategies. It's clear Republicans, Democrats, President Obama, across the board, have been very much supportive and are considering Snowden as a traitor. Now, concerning Snowden, I think what he wanted to highlight something of concern. More, I think, his willingness to unbreach specific information. His intent was to denounce the whole system. So I think this is something that has to be taken into account. The same thing concerning Assange. Well, I think as an ordinary citizen, it's good to see what my politicians were planning, cooking, and while they say something and do something else.
Sometimes it's very good on the corporate level. That's why we have whistleblowers. So how when it comes to a system? In fact, we will discover deep insights about this topic right after the last break in this episode. A break, and we'll be back.
Wherever those are persecuted, that place we tackle case by case.
Cases, where we believe that injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere.
Hello again to Global Insight. Dr. Labaki, the President of the EU Parliament, Martin Schulz, who bears the German nationality as well, said that if the reports which were mentioned in Der Spiegel and The Guardian were correct, it would have a severe impact on the relation between the EU and the United States. What severe impact is he talking about?
I don't think it will be severe in the sense that they will stop negotiating that free trade area agreement. I think the Europeans will be much more cautious, and also the public opinion will be more suspicious about the US.
But many policymakers said that this free trade agreement between Washington and the EU should be stopped until further clarification from the US. Isn't the US supposed to give this further clarification?
Well, if I think the US is to offer guarantee that this will not happen again, but it doesn't seem to be the trend. The idea circulated, and this is really what is not acceptable to me. Everybody is doing it, so we are okay, we are equal.
But as you've said, this applies to anybody, but not to the European states, because the Viviane Reding, the European Commission for Justice and Fundamental Rights, said that partners do not spy on each other. And she added, we cannot negotiate over a big transatlantic market if there is the slightest doubt that our partners are carrying out spying activities on the offices of our negotiators. So she's threatening that these negotiations might be hindered, might be stopped. There are many barriers for these negotiations.
I think that they will be slowed down, but they will resume, because what is at stake is very important. You have huge economic interests, and as professor, you know, the trend in today's world is to have the, huge free trade areas.
Definitely, especially in the presence of the economic crises which we are witnessing.
Absolutely, and countries are looking to sell more, to import more, to sell more, and to produce more wealth. But I think they will be more cautious in future negotiations.
In addition to the economic interest, we have witnessed a sort of divergence between the EU countries' stances and the US stances regarding many issues, especially the issues of the Middle East. Might this skepticism or the doubt which was established via spying have an impact and increase the divergence between the stances of the US and the EU?
Well, there are a number of divergences, mainly concerning culture, the cultural diversity, the cultural issues. And I think this is, in a way, part of that.
In addition to the cultural, I'm talking about political divergence. Political divergence regarding, for example, what's happening in Syria and the armament of the political opposition, for example. So there has been divergence. Might this increase the gap between the two stances?
I doubt that, because the major power broker in the Middle East is the United States, not Europe. In a way,
but they seek the support of
have
Europe.
Been lined up on US positions. When the US expressed doubt on arming Syrian opposition, as you know, the British and the French were eager.
They were highly eager in the beginning.
And now they cooled it down, and probably they changed their mind.
Due to the US voice, or
due to the US concern,
but
definitely.
In the UK, David Cameron didn't guarantee the majority in the parliament or in his party to have the armament of the oppositions in Syria. So was the concern internal, or was it the US hegemony in formulating these strategies?
If my recollection is correct, when the US State Department expressed concern about arms selling in the hands of the Qaeda, I think Europeans then had second thoughts and finally did not deliver anything of importance, luckily. So not this specific act will have a very important impact, because we know that European and US intelligence are cooperating in the Middle East. So I think, again, they will be more cautious, they will be more attentive in their strategic planning, not to have it fall in the hands of their friends or in the hands of their allies, but it will not have really an important impact otherwise in the Middle East.
Not in the formulation of strategies, because you've said that the UK and the French position were very similar to the US position before the spying has taken place. So don't you think, or you anticipate that the French or the UK will implement their interests regardless of the US interest after the spying has taken place?
No, I don't think so, and the proof is that they did not arm. It was much more lip service or non-lethal aid. Also, I think Europe and the US are having now second thoughts. There is a complete change of policies concerning Syria. And I think the whole policy will change, especially after what's happening in Turkey, in Egypt. I think there is a complete policy review.
The threat of extreme, the threat of the extremist groups.
Yes, I think there is a big policy review, and as professor, you know, what does that mean in business? When you have a policy review, you can scrap everything you have done
and start from scratch, maybe.
From scratch again. I think this is happening in the Middle East, concerning Syria, concerning Egypt, and even Turkey. So I think we have to wait new strategies.
So do you anticipate consensus between the European states' stances and the US stances regarding the Middle Eastern issues?
In the Middle East, yes. You see, US foreign policy and Europe, they cooperate in a big number of fields, but also they have their differences and their own interest in another number of issues. The Middle East, I think, is a place where they finally have a common policy. At least in practice, this is what we have been witnessing in the past 3 years. Now, concerning trade, they have different positions. So it depends on the different agendas. In many cases, they have the same strategies, the same views. On other issues, they have their own more specific interests.
Despite the suspicion in the relation between the EU and the US, you said that they have changed the strategy which they used to formulate regarding the Middle East. What has triggered this change?
Well, very simply, I think the survival of the Syrian regime is an example, is a very good example. As you know, in their analysis, their policy analysis, they thought they would win in a couple of weeks. And we have the statements of the different presidents, policymakers in Washington, in Paris, in London. Finally, the Syrian regime resisted. And when you resist, you create new facts.
You have more bargaining power.
You have more bargaining power. Then when you see your allies being weak, people who supported, you have doubt about really their real intent. So slowly, slowly, you are forced to change policy. Here, just to mention one important factor, what happened with to the US ambassador in Libya. Someone, you know, probably the victim of US allies. We have to wait the inquiry, but there are strong indicators or accusations in that concern. This
and
provoked
it was the Benghazi report. You mean it was one of the 3 scandals which Obama has faced around 45 days ago.
You have a number of people who left office. Clinton, Hillary Clinton, many others, Sarkozy in France. Isn't it enough to provoke a policy change?
And this policy change has had its impact on some Arab leaders leaving office.
Course.
Not only as Qatar's emir, as probably Erdogan in Turkey, besides being Arab, other than the Arab countries, Erdogan we're talking, and maybe in Egypt is an example as well. So how can we control the invasion of privacy? How can we protect the freedom of our citizens?
Yes, social medias are excellent technologies and means of communication. But as you know, when you have a new discovery, a new technology, it could be great, but also there is the frame of the law. We have to protect public order, we have to protect national security indeed, and we have to protect privacy. I think I have 3 things in mind now on the spot. First of all, there should be transparency. In a lot of government activities, transparency is a must. 2, there should be accountability. Every public official should be accountable. You know, absolute power corrupts absolutely.
Definitely.
So we have to make everyone accountable.
The accountability and the transparency, can they be put under the title of good corporate governance?
Definitely, definitely. In every type of organization. To avoid corruption, you need transparency and accountability. Now, in the intelligence world, you can have specific structures, specific bodies created to monitor activities of such specific services. But this has to apply to every institution. Then, of course, we have to review policy guidelines to establish a real balance between national security, and privacy. Also, I think you have to create a number of institutions, watchdogs, associations, citizen groups, really to watch and to follow up on such policies. Because what is at stake, believe me, is the future of democracy. Again, I am someone who knows very much what is the meaning of national security. But under that label, we are afraid of politically motivated investigations, invasion of privacy, misuse of such information. And my major concern, what do you do with the data? I think it's normal that you delete that data after a while. You know criminals who get a fine or a sanction, when they serve their penalty, the penalty is deleted from their files, because wherever they go, if someone goes back to the file, he won't hire them again. Definitely. Although they have served their sentence. Society have punished them. So I think, what do you do with the data?
The law has punished them,
so the society has to be declassified.
Declassified, yeah.
Especially data that is really irrelevant. So I think we have to sort out, and this is an occasion to rethink the system and to draw new policies that could, at the same time, protect government interest, national security, and the privacy of citizens.
Aren't there limits for freedom?
The law, a clear law that sets rights and duties, a clear law that makes public officials accountable, as well as people, a law that is transparent. Let me give you an example of transparency. As you know, the Vatican Bank had witnessed a number of scandals. And it has been a headache for the church. Benoit XVI, before he left, he ordered to put all the accounts online. See that such technologies are really of interest. Now, let's the word look, monitor, control, and then you will, instead of having 1, 2, 3, 5 ton accounting agency reporting, controlling, being some way suspicious, here you have the whole humanity controlling. So I think this is the type of transparency we need in our organizations. Because these technologies are really great, but are frightening, because the capacity to trace is really immense, unprecedented in humankind history. Personally, as a university professor, as a humanist, this is my concern, you see. At the same time, national security, but also privacy.
In fact, what has been shocking is that both the US and the EU are considered partners in trade, and in many political stances, they share the same stance. What has led to the lack of transparency in their relation? And triggered this spying activity and triggered the invasion of privacy?
See, sometimes there is a phobia concerning intelligence. When you see enemies everywhere, this is
everyone might
could be an enemy.
Could be an enemy.
So this is one. Two, don't underestimate the economic interests. I can give you a lot of examples. We spoke about aviation industry. There are thousands of examples of such spying, giving some companies really a high technological edge or an advance. Okay? We call this in business the strategic watch.
Yeah.
You have someone watching what everybody else is doing.
But the strategic watch can be done via ethical manners.
Well, often it's not done through ethical matters. We have indicated that. Basically, spying on economic negotiations is not really ethical. You have the right to collect information published, but you don't have the right to steal the information. So I think huge economic interests are really behind also such intelligence policies. And this distorts fair competition. As you know, in the international current economic system, we want free trade areas. We want to waive all technical barriers to trade, all non-technical barriers to trade. So here you are breaching a major principle in international trade and in our current global world, isn't it?
Yeah. As a conclusion, transparency, accountability, and confining to the law are the solutions for respecting the right of privacy and for setting a limit between the privacy right and the security concerns which all the citizens in the world share. Dr. George Labaki, I highly thank you for your deep insights in this episode. You are a political science professor at Notre Dame University and a political analyst. I'd like to highly thank Dr. Hilal Khachan for his phone intervention. Dr. Khachan is a political analyst and a political science professor at AUB. In fact, the debate over the invasion of privacy has been an overheated debate, and apparently it will continue to be. And here, what's being jeopardized is, what might be jeopardized actually, is the relation between the European Union and the United States of America. Further insight about this topic, among many other topics, will be in future episodes. Until then, stay tuned to Global Insight.
Thousands of years ago, civilizations were born. The chronicles embraced Iraq by all the means of life banks, and for all that, Iraq has built Baghdad now. Our show, Baghdad Now, is your path to live Iraq's most recent updates.
The Cultural Revolution was a political movement that took place in the People's Republic of China. It was set in motion by Mao Zedong, then chairman of the Communist Party of China. The revolution's stated goals were to enforce communism in the country by removing capitalist and traditional cultural elements from Chinese society and to impose Maoist orthodoxy within the party. The movement paralyzed China politically and significantly affected the country on both the economic and social levels. Mao launched the revolution on May 5 of 1966. He alleged that bourgeois elements were infiltrating the government and society at large with the aim of restoring capitalism. China's youth responded to Mao's appeal by forming Red Guard groups around the country. The movement spread into the military, affecting urban workers and the Communist Party leadership itself. Millions of people were persecuted in the resulting violent factional struggles that ensued across the country, and many suffered a wide range of abuses, including public humiliation, arbitrary imprisonment, torture, sustained harassment, and seizure of property. Many historical relics and artifacts were also destroyed in the process. Mao officially declared the Cultural Revolution to have ended in 1969, but its active phase lasted until the death of the military leader, Lin Biao, in 1971. Mao died in 1976, and most of the Maoist reforms associated with the Cultural Revolution were abandoned 2 years later.
Time. Variable. Event. The only constant variable in life is change. Broader perspective. Arguments and counter-arguments on our platform.
Global Insights. The globe on our platform. Al-Etejah News Channel. The truth fears no questions.
Anyone can develop an ecological awareness in their daily lives and above all at work, where we tend to waste a great deal of a very precious resource, paper. Anyone who works in an office consumes between 50 and 75 kilos of paper per year. This is a lot, yet we could easily cut this figure in half. How? By choosing to recycle paper, by printing and photocopying recto verso, by cutting and pasting, filling a page up rather than printing just a few lines, by not printing out emails, by using internal networks as much as possible, notably to arrange meetings or give out information. This cuts the need for paper memos and notes. Stop large print programs triggered by mistake. Reuse paper used for notes and drafts. Even if you use your computer and photocopier wisely, think about switching it off along with the lights if you leave your office for more than 30 minutes.
Pollution and climate change, medicine manipulation, genetically modified food, the destruction of wildlife, and corporate exploitation. These are all part of a new terrorism threatening our future.
Eco-terrorism. Global awakening to a world under threat. Al-Etejah News Channel. The truth fears no questions.
Hello and welcome to this new installment of the Daily Scope. Coming to you from Beirut, I'm Taghreed Najdi. From the turbulent Middle East to tumultuous Africa, we've got you covered when it comes down to news. We're going to venture on a tour of both regional and international newspapers. With us in the studio to discuss the latest headlines is political and media analyst Dr. George Farha. Welcome to the show, Dr. Farha.
Thank you very much.
But before we begin our discussion, let's take a look at this overview news report by Lemis Karu.